Hey, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're cutting through the haze on a topic that is, well, super confusing: marijuana. It's a plant just tangled up in decades of myths and, honestly, a lot of propaganda.
So, what is it? Is it this totally harmless plant, or is it a dangerous drug? Look, if you feel like you're getting mixed signals on this, you're not alone. The whole conversation around it is just a mess of extremes. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to cut through all that noise. We're going to unravel the biggest, most common myths by just looking at what the science actually says. So, let's get into it. All right, first up, cannabis and your body. Beyond all the hype, what does it actually do? Let's kick things off with one of the biggest points of debate out there: addiction. So you've probably heard this one a million times. Marijuana isn't addictive. But the reality? It's a bit more complicated than that. Now, while it's definitely not a guarantee, the science is clear that it can be addictive. The number is about 9% of people who use it. Or, to put it another way, roughly 1 out of every 11 users might develop what doctors call cannabis use disorder.
Okay, so what about overdosing? You've definitely heard people say you can't die from weed. And when it comes to a lethal overdose, dying from THC alone, that seems to be true. It's just not really documented. But, and this is a big but, you can have an acute overdose. This is where you take way too much, and it happens a lot with potent modern edibles. It can trigger some really scary stuff: severe panic, paranoia, even temporary psychosis. And yeah, it often leads to a trip to the emergency room.
And this leads us to another really common defense you hear: hey, it's natural, so it has to be harmless, right? Well, that logic kind of falls apart fast when you think about it. I mean, tobacco is natural. So is poison ivy, nightshade, raw opium. All of these powerful and sometimes dangerous substances come straight from the earth. The bottom line is, natural just doesn't automatically mean safe.
And what about just smoking it? What are the health risks there? Well, the science on this is pretty direct. When you burn any plant material, and that includes cannabis, it creates tar and a lot of the same cancer-causing chemicals, carcinogens, that are found in tobacco. So heavy, habitual smoking can lead to things like chronic bronchitis and damage to your airways. When it comes to smoke, it's the combustion that's the problem, not just what's being burned.
So with all these risks, does it have any medical value? For a long time, the official line was that it had zero medical benefits. But well, science has proven that wrong. We now know that components in cannabis are really effective for some specific things, like easing nausea from chemotherapy, helping with certain rare types of epilepsy, and managing chronic pain. But, and listen, this part is absolutely critical. It is not a proven cure for cancer, no matter what crazy stuff you might see floating around online. Okay, so let's shift gears now. We've talked about the body, let's talk about the mind. How does cannabis affect our psychology? This is where we run into some of the wildest, most dramatic myths of all.
Just listen to this. This is a quote from Harry Anslinger, who is basically the guy who led the crusade for marijuana prohibition back in the 1930s. He's talking about slaves to this narcotic who deteriorate mentally, become insane, turn to violent crime and murder. I mean, wow. This was the whole reefer madness era, painting this picture of cannabis users as these violent, insane criminals. But was any of that actually true?
Yeah, nope, not at all.
Modern science has found absolutely no causal link between cannabis use and violence. In fact, it's the opposite of something like alcohol, which we know is strongly linked to aggression. The crime that was associated with marijuana back then, it came from the fact that it was an illegal trade, not from the effects of the plant on the people using it.
Okay, but what about the idea that pot makes you dumber? There was this really famous early study that seemed to prove it. It found a pretty significant IQ drop in teenagers who were heavy users. But, science doesn't just stop. Researchers kept digging. And later, more advanced studies, these ones using twins, which is a great way to control for other factors, they found no significant difference. This suggests that things like family environment or genetics were likely the real reason for the drop. So what's the takeaway? The evidence for a permanent IQ drop is now considered pretty weak.
All right, let's talk about the big one. The classic lazy stoner stereotype. Does marijuana really crush your motivation?
Well, look, while being high can definitely make you want to just chill on the couch in the short term, there's just no real evidence of some kind of permanent amotivational syndrome. When people are sober, studies actually find no significant difference in motivation between regular cannabis users and non-users. So yeah, that lazy stoner image, it's really more of a caricature than a reality.
Okay, so if the effects on one person are this nuanced, what happens when we zoom out and look at society as a whole? Let's break down 3 key areas: potency, policy, and public safety.
First things first, it's so important to understand that the cannabis out there today is a completely different animal. Back in the 80s, the average THC content was maybe around 4%. Today, it is totally common to see products with 15, 20, even over 30% THC. Seriously, this is not your parents' weed. It's a much, much more potent substance.
Okay, a huge fear that's always come up with legalization is its effect on kids. The question everyone asks is, does making cannabis legal for adults actually lead to more teenagers using it?
And you know what? The data here is really surprising. You'd totally think that legalization would cause teen use to just skyrocket, right? But as more and more states have gone legal, the rate of past-month use among U.S. high schoolers has actually gone down nationally. That big surge everyone was worried about, it just hasn't happened.
So why? What's going on? Well, one of the leading theories is that legal, regulated markets are actually better at keeping cannabis away from kids. Think about it. A black market dealer isn't going to ask for your ID, but a licensed dispensary absolutely has to. That actually makes it harder for minors to get their hands on it.
But what about getting behind the wheel? Let's be perfectly 100% clear on this. The idea that it's safe to drive while high is a dangerous myth, period. Cannabis impairs your reaction time, your judgment. It roughly doubles your risk of getting into a car crash. And yeah, it is illegal everywhere.
All right, so let's put this all into the bigger picture. We've busted some myths, but how does cannabis really stack up against other legal substances that many of us use every day?
This is where context is just everything. Take a look at this comparison. You see, alcohol has a high potential for a lethal overdose and a strong link to violence. Tobacco, it has a way, way higher rate of addiction. Now, when you measure cannabis against these specific dangers, it clearly has a different risk profile. Now, that doesn't mean it's harmless, not at all, but it does help put the actual risks into perspective.
So, where does all this leave us? Well, the truth about cannabis clearly isn't found in those old extremes. It's not some miracle cure-all, but it's also not the reefer madness demon drug. The reality that the science shows us is this complex middle ground, one with real risks, but also some specific, proven benefits.
You know, getting the facts straight is really just the first step. The real challenge, the important part, comes next. Now that we can see past the haze of the myths, the real question becomes, how do we use this more nuanced, fact-based understanding to build smarter, safer public policies? That's the conversation we all need to be having now. Thanks for watching The Explainer.